Welcome back, game developers. Today we are going to look at variables and data types. We will create a way to keep track of the player's score, give our player some health, and finally build a simple display so the user can see all of this information. We're going to add on to our previous project, so if you are new to the channel, you can download the project files in the description below. Okay, so in Construct there are two main types of variables. There are global variables, and they're going to remember their data when you move between layouts. And then there are instance variables, and those are going to forget their data when you move between layouts. So in today's example, we are going to make the player's health, their score, and then we're going to check whether or not they have found a key. So score is going to be more of a global variable, but the player's health and whether or not they have a key are going to be their instance variables. Okay, we're back here in the editor, and the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add the ability for the player to actually earn some points. So let's go to our event sheet, and let's go to our event where the player has collided with the coin. Okay, so this is where we're going to add an action, but before we do that, we need to create our variable so we can store that data. So to create a global variable for the player's score, we're going to right click in the empty space and we're going to do add global variable. And go ahead and name it score and hit OK. All right, now we have a variable so we can actually start saving information to it. So when the player collides with the coin, let's add an action. And to change variables, that's under System. So under System, let's add to the player's score by 1. Okay. Now next, we want the player to lose some health when they collide with fire. Now to do that, we need to give the player some health. Now we could make a global variable, but for player health, an instance variable is usually helpful. So let's go to layout 1 and select your player, and then in its properties on the left you can select instance variables. And let's go ahead and add an instance variable and let's call it health, and this will be a number as well, and let's start it out at 10. So the player is going to have 10 health. Okay, so we have a variable for the player health and we have a variable for the score. Now let's make a variable to keep track of whether or not the player has found the key. Okay, and let's make that an instance variable again. So we selected the player, go to instance variables, add a new instance variable, and this time we're going to select Boolean. So this is true or false, and we're going to call it has key. And its initial value is unchecked, so that means false. Okay, now that we have our variables in place, we can actually code them. So heading back to our event sheet, we have player on collision with fire. Let's go ahead and subtract some health. So player, and then scroll down to subtract from instance variables. And let's subtract 1 from their health. Great. Now we don't have a key just yet, so let's go ahead and make a key. So let's go back to our layout. Let's double click in the empty space and we'll create a new sprite for our key. Go ahead and click anywhere to spawn the sprite editor. And for this, let's draw a simple little key. Got a little turn at the top, body, and some pieces to the key. All right, there's our key. Looks great. Okay. Go ahead and name it key. And let's shrink it down so it's not so big. And place it somewhere on the map for the player to grab. Okay, great. Now let's write some code for our key. Now in our pseudocode, we said that when the player collides with the key, we'll destroy the key and we'll set the Boolean to be true. So let's do that. So add an event, and we're going to do player on collision with another object. So when the player collides with the key, okay, what do we want to have happen? Well, we want the key to be destroyed, and we want to set the player's Boolean variable to be true. So under instance variable, you have set Boolean, okay, has key, and we're going to set that to be true. Okay, awesome. We have our code set up, but we have no way for the player to actually see any of this information. So that's what we're going to do next. We're going to create a simple heads-up display. So head over to your layout, and to do this, we're going to need a second layer. So in the layer window, you're going to right-click, and you're going to do add layer at top. And we're going to rename this, and we're going to call this the HUD, or the heads-up display. Now the heads-up display is going to have a special property. Over on the left-hand side, you have parallax. And this is the rate at which the layer scrolls in each direction. So we don't want this layer to scroll at all. We want it to be frozen in place. So we're going to set it to be 0x0. You can hit enter. Now you won't see any visible change, but you'll see it when we're previewing our game. Now, to display our information, we're going to use a text box. So double click on the empty space and scroll down and find text. Okay, and go ahead and hit insert and then click in an empty space. And you'll see that you created a text box. Now you'll need to resize this so that it's big enough to display all of our information. And then go ahead and just move it to the top left-hand corner of your screen there. Awesome. Now let's rename this HUD. Okay, so we have our text object. We've renamed it HUD. It is on our layer, the HUD layer, and our HUD layer has a 0, 0 parallax. Now let's write some code so that our text here will update. So going back to our event sheet, we're going to add another event, and we want this to happen every tick. So system every tick, okay, or in other words, this is going to run always. Go ahead and hit next. Now what do we want to have happen? We want our text box to be updated. So add action, and we're going to select our HUD text, and we are going to set its text. Now, what do we want the text to display? Well, we want to display the player's health, their score, and whether or not they have the key. So here's how we're going to do that. We're going to write player health space colon and then a quotation mark to close it up. And then we're going to use the and symbol to connect text with variables. So the player health. And then what is it? Well, it was the player dot and then the name of their instance variable, which we called health. Space, and then another and symbol. And now we're going to write some more text. So quotation mark, space. Okay, now the player's score. So player score colon space. Okay, and the and symbol, and then the name of the variable, which we called score. You can see autocomplete suggests it for us. Okay, and then another and symbol, and then quotation mark, and now whether or not the player has key. Okay, so key colon space, quotation mark, and symbol. Okay, and then the name of that instance variable, right? So it was player, because it was an instance variable, player dot, and then the name of its variable, which was has key. And done. Oh, I see a typo right here. I want to say player health colon space. There we go. Okay, so we have a lot of code, so now let's test it and see if it works. All right, we're in preview mode, so first thing we want to do is check player health. Will it go down when we hit the fire? Oh my goodness, my player's been completely destroyed and player health went down to 0. Well, why did player health go down to 0? Well, if the instance is gone, deleted, then its variables all go down to 0, right? So that makes sense. We can reload our game by pressing the F5 key at the top of your keyboard. So F5, it's going to go ahead and reload it. All right, let's check our other code. Okay, if we come down and get this coin, will our player score go from 0 to 1? Okay, sure does. All right, and now what happens if we get the key here? Okay, key goes from 0 to 1. All right, so after we previewed our game and tested it, we noticed that some of our code worked as expected, some of our code didn't. So let's take a look and see if we can figure out what's going on. So when we collided with the fire, we wanted just 1 point from our health to go down, but our player was destroyed. And if we look at our code, we can see that, well, that's exactly what we told it to do. So let's go ahead and get rid of destroy the player. All right, so now when the player collides with the fire, they'll only have some health taken away. All right, now another thing I noticed is our text didn't quite display nicely. It was all kind of cramped together. So we can come in here and we can just add some more spaces in between, and then that will help space out our text a little bit better. All right, let's go ahead and test it again, see how it looks. All right, coming back into the game, when we collide with the fire, we can see that our health goes down a little bit. Okay, so that's working. Our text is displayed a little bit easier to read, and of course, everything else still works. Awesome.